Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also would like to join in this joint apology or collective apology to the three of you. This is unconscionable, and this is one of the reasons that I think I and many others of the freshman class ran for office to try to deal with the type of inefficiencies and abuses in government that we've seen. I'd also like to respond to something that Mr. Souter said, and I understand his sensitivity, but I read this whole hearing a little bit differently. I'm willing to stipulate that the industry has a pretty good record of providing safe products, and I think it's simply the fact that this appears to be such an aberration that it would call into question why FEMA didn't look at, even if it were only 58 cases, we know it's more than that, and say, wait a minute, there's something very wrong here because these manufactured homes should not be this way. I think it's specifically because this is so unusual that FEMA should have had red flags all over the place and taken action. But I want to get to the issue with you as to maybe how widespread these incidents were. And I know when the committee announced that it was holding hearings, we heard from a number of organizations that have been dealing with this issue. One of them called Alabama Arise, and a man named Zach Carter, who's an organizer there, submitted some written testimony to the committee because he couldn't appear. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to make that a part of the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection.
And he stated in his written testimony, I have met and video interviewed dozens of Katrina victims in South Mobile County, and I can say that almost each one has complained to me about health problems that they have developed since moving into their FEMA camper, from nosebleeds and bronchitis to high blood pressure. David Underhill of Mobile Bay Sierra Clubs has informed us that almost all of the dozen FEMA campers that organization tested had problems with formaldehyde. We've had testimony from many people. So I'm interested in knowing about it, particularly with the three of you, and I'm not familiar with the setting in which you live, but I assume that you lived in an area where there were many people in similar circumstances living in FEMA-supplied campers. Did you have conversations with these people to share their experiences? Would you elaborate on those for us?
Sir, immediately after my test results came out and were publicized, I was contacted by the Sierra Club and took part in assisting them in testing campers in Bay Village, which is a FEMA trailer park in Bay St. Louis. And I'll tell you two things that were shocking. Number one were the number of trailers that tested with excessively high formaldehyde. 88% of all the campers that were tested had formaldehyde levels that were deemed unhealthy. And the second, and almost a scary thing, is that when we walked in and asked these people, you know, this is who we are, this is who I am, I tested my camper was high, can we hang a test kit in your camper to make sure that what you're living in is safe? And almost unanimously, the first response was, as long as it's okay with FEMA, because I don't want to lose this house, because if I lose it, I'm going to be living back on my slab. And the fear of FEMA was so strong that people would rather live in an unhealthy environment than to be back on the street, because they feared FEMA would come in and snatch that house right out from underneath them. And even when I actually when the first media event happened, and I had, you know, publicized what happened to me, the reporter who did the report, he was living in a FEMA camper too. And we actually joked back and forth because we had already heard of FEMA coming in heavy-handed and taking campers away from people. And we actually contemplated, you know, what happens if this thing goes out? You may lose your house too, because he was living in a FEMA camper. There is a deep-rooted fear of people living in these things that those tactics, someone's going to come in and snatch up their house. And so that's...
Right, I just have a few seconds left, so I'd like Mrs. Huckabee and Mr. Harris to comment also about their experiences, if you had conversations with others who did.
I too, at school meetings and at, you know, play dates and things like that, you know, conversation would come up about somebody not being there because their child was sick again and again and again, and it was the same type stuff, asthma symptoms. I cannot count the number of people I know that have had children born since the storm, and they all have asthma. It used to be something where, you know, every once in a while you'd hear of somebody, but I think almost literally every friend that I have that's had a child born since the storm, they have turned asthmatic, and they're all in the FEMA trailers.
I would just like to quickly echo and say yes. As a minister, what we try to do is help people during the times that they're feeling very vulnerable and times that they're feeling inadequate. And I want to tell you that there are trailer parks and other areas where people are suffering. And I must say again to you, please hear me. It's not an imagined thing that what Mr. Stewart is saying. There is a fear. There is an element that they make you feel like you ought to be glad you got this. Congressman, I can't overemphasize that. So when we're saying this to you, please hear me.
Thank you. We hear you very loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yarmuth.